All right, today we're diving deep into something fascinating, the emotional architecture of the psychedelic brain.
And we're kicking things off with a question that, let's be honest, a lot of us are wondering about. Is a good trip really the secret to healing the mind? Now, this isn't just some philosophical debate. Scientists are taking this super seriously, and they're investigating it through a really surprising lens: serotonergic psychedelics. These are the compounds that work on your brain's serotonin system. That's the same system that helps regulate your mood. So for this discussion, let's think of these less as party drugs and more as incredibly powerful scientific tools. Tools that could help us map our own inner emotional world.
Okay, so let's follow the first major clue in this investigation. It's what you might call the good trip theory. And the idea is pretty straightforward. Maybe it's those powerful, positive emotions you feel during a psychedelic session that are the real engine for healing.
So what does that actually feel like? I mean, we're talking about, and this is a quote from the research, the induction of intensely positive emotional states ranging from heightened joy and sublime happiness to profound feelings of unity and connection. Wow. That powerful, positive shift, that is the absolute heart of this whole theory.
Scientists actually have a name for this specific feeling. They call it oceanic boundlessness. Sounds pretty epic, right? It's basically this key part of the experience where you feel a sense of yourself dissolving, a feeling of unity with, well, everything, and this just incredibly elevated mood. It's their way of putting a scientific pin in that profound good trip feeling.
And at first, the evidence for this theory looked really strong. I mean, one study found that those intense feelings of ecstasy could predict psychological benefits 3 months later. Another found that the intensity of that oceanic boundlessness we just mentioned was a good predictor of antidepressant response, not just weeks but months later. It all seemed to line up perfectly, a really clear connection.
But this is where our story takes a turn. Because, like any good mystery, the clues started to get complicated. They started to conflict. And this right here, this is the central puzzle we're trying to solve. Look at this. On one side, you've got studies saying a positive mood predicts a good antidepressant response. Great. But then other trials come along and find zero correlation, none. Same thing for those feelings of unity predicting benefits. Some studies say yes, others say no. The evidence is literally pointing in opposite directions.
So what on earth is going on? How can these carefully designed scientific studies be giving us such contradictory clues? That's the big question we need to dig into. All right, let's explore a new angle. Maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't the theory at all. Maybe the problem is with the tools we're using to measure everything. Are our instruments just not sharp enough for the job?
The whole issue might come down to something scientists call granularity. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to describe a beautiful piece of music, but the only words you have are loud and quiet. You'd miss everything, right? All the nuance. Well, researchers might be doing something similar by grouping all these complex positive feelings into one big, broad score. And that could be hiding the very details that matter most. What if, say, a feeling of awe is super therapeutic, but just happiness isn't? If you lump them together, you could totally miss the real secret to what's going on.
So, here's a peek inside the actual toolkit researchers are using. Each of these instruments is like a different camera lens. You've got the 5D ASC, which is built to capture those big, altered states like oceanic boundlessness. Then there's the MEQ, which zooms in on mystical qualities, including positive mood. The PANAS is more of a general mood tracker, positive and negative feelings. And the CEQ is designed to measure the tough stuff, the challenging emotions like grief or fear. So when you realize that each tool is measuring a totally different slice of this huge experience, well, it's not so surprising the results can look contradictory, is it? It's kind of like asking 4 people to describe a parade when they're all standing on different street corners.
Okay, so measuring subjective feelings is tricky. Let's pivot. Let's go deeper, right into the brain itself, and search for some hard biological clues.
And you know what? Neuroimaging gives us a huge clue. Remember that oceanic boundlessness we keep talking about? Well, it turns out it's associated with what they call a globally hyperconnected brain state. In simple terms, parts of your brain that usually don't talk to each other suddenly start chattering away like old friends. It's a massive increase in communication. This might just be the biological signature of that profound feeling of unity.
And it gets even more interesting when we zoom in on the brain's fear center, the amygdala. Let's compare what psilocybin does to what traditional SSRI antidepressants do, the most common ones. Psilocybin immediately reduces how reactive the amygdala is to emotional stuff.
It just dials it down. But SSRIs, they don't do that. Not with that same acute effect. We're talking about a completely fundamental difference in how these things work inside your brain.
Okay, so let's take a breath. Where does all this leave our investigation? Let's quickly recap this whole unfolding mystery and figure out where the case stands right now.
All right, here's what we know so far. Clue 1. Intensely positive emotions are obviously a key feature. Clue 2. The link between those feelings and actually getting better is, well, it's inconsistent. Clue 3. Our measurement tools might be too blunt, not precise enough. And clue 4. On a brain level, we see this unique hyperconnected state and a totally different effect on the amygdala compared to SSRIs. It is one complex puzzle for sure.
And just when you think you've got it figured out, there's one more clue. A recent study looked at psilocybin microdosing, taking these tiny doses you don't even really feel. And what did they find? Absolutely no measurable effect on emotional processing or depression. This is a big deal because it strongly suggests that the intensity of the full-blown psychedelic experience might be absolutely crucial.
So all of this leaves us with a final, really important question. If a good trip isn't the whole story, then what is? How do we map this incredible new emotional territory so we can finally unlock its full potential for healing? That's the challenge ahead.